Hey guys, tonight we arrive in a snow-crusted Viking village where even your breath feels heavy. The sky above is an endless grey, and the air bites at your cheeks like 1,000 tiny needles. You stand on the edge of the village, bundled in ill-fitting furs that smell vaguely of goat and wet firewood. The snow beneath your feet crunches, but not with that festive holiday kind of crunch. It's the reluctant, half-melted mush of a winter that's already overstayed its welcome. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere chilly, or perhaps somewhere where the sun hasn't risen in a while, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm always curious where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, breath steaming from your nostrils like a sad little dragon. The village looms ahead. Just 24 timber longhouses huddled together like they're trying to avoid the wind. Every roof is heavy with snow, sagging slightly under the weight. Smoke curls lazily from holes in the rooftops, trailing into the sky like forgotten thoughts. Your first step through the village gate doesn't feel triumphant. It feels like your foot just disappeared into 1.5 feet of slush. Welcome to the daily reality of Viking winter, where your socks will never dry, your toes will never feel warm, and your only consolation is that at least you're not outside the walls when the wolves get bold. The first villager you see is an old woman whose eyebrows are quite literally frosted. She regards you without moving, then returns to what appears to be the ancient Scandinavian art of angrily churning butter. A child scampers past you barefoot, wearing what looks like a fur tunic made from something that once snarled. How is he not freezing? Why are you the only one shivering like a cheap curtain? A historical fact for you. Viking villages like this one dotted much of Scandinavia by the 9th century. They were usually situated near fjords or rivers for easy access to trade routes, or escape, depending on the season's pillaging schedule. Winter, however, turned even the most well-placed village into a frigid trap. Livestock needed shelter, roads became impassable, and the social calendar mostly consisted of surviving the night. Your longhouse is at the edge of the village, past the frozen troughs and what might be a suspiciously stiff pig. You duck inside and are immediately smacked in the face by a wave of warm, smoky air. It's thick with the scent of pine, sweat and damp wool. The interior is dim, lit by one flickering oil lamp and the dull orange glow of a hearth buried in ashes. No walls separate the sleeping areas, just low platforms, heaps of animal skins, and the occasional snoring lump that might be a person or a well-insulated dog. You drop your bag, such as it is, a sad bundle of salted fish and a too small spoon, and claim a spot by the wall. Someone coughs violently from the opposite corner. A baby wails. A goat bleats in what can only be described as emotional distress. This, you begin to realise, is not a place where sleep comes easy. And then comes the draft. That famous Viking longhouse draft. Despite the fire in the centre, cold air seeps in from the gaps in the walls under the door, and probably from an eldritch portal under the floorboards. Your blanket, a stiff pelt of questionable origin, smells faintly of fermented turnips, and provides the thermal insulation of a wet napkin. Curiously, scholars still debate how effective Viking longhouses truly were at retaining heat. While the central hearth and thick timber walls provided some relief, drafts were a known issue, and many relied on sheer body heat from communal sleeping. That's right, you're going to have to cuddle, and not in the romantic candlelit way. More like, I hope that's not someone's foot way. You shift onto your side and get a mouthful of fur and smoke. Someone turns over nearby and emits a sound that can only be described as a historical groan. You're too cold to laugh, too tired to cry, and too unsure to sleep. But before your eyes close completely, a strange realization creeps in. You're here, in a place where time moves slowly, where the snow falls like an ancient lullaby, and where the stars, when they do appear, shine like frozen memories. Maybe, just maybe, you'll last a day after all. Or maybe not. Tomorrow is Ice Bucket Face Wash Day. You wake up because your foot is in someone's mouth. Not metaphorically, literally. A small child, presumably the barefoot blur from yesterday, is sleeping sideways across the furs and has latched onto your toe like it's his personal comfort goat. You yank your foot back with as much grace as a sleep-deprived guest in a Viking longhouse can manage and immediately regret it. Because your toes, now exposed, are colder than betrayal. Welcome to the morning routine of a Viking winter village. Confusion, regret, and a series of increasingly terrible attempts at feeling human again. You sit up slowly. Your back makes a sound. The inside of the longhouse is still dim, but there's a new hue to the light coming from outside. The kind that suggests it might be morning, or possibly late afternoon, or maybe a cruel joke played by the low-hanging winter sun. Someone is already stoking the hearth with long, practiced movements. Sparks leap into the smoky air as a pile of half-dry pine crackles to life. You stand, stretch, and immediately bump your head on a beam. It's okay. Everyone does that at least once. Probably. Your furs are damp from your own breath. Your hair smells like boiled onions and your mouth tastes like you've licked a piece of burnt wood. You shuffle toward the door, driven by one thought. Fresh air. You open it and are immediately smacked by a blast of frigid wind so sharp, it feels like it has something personal against you. You regret everything. But you push forward, furs trailing behind like a heroic cape made of sadness and damp wolf. Outside, the snow crunches underfoot. The village is beginning to stir. Smoke snakes lazily from chimneys. Someone is yelling at a pig. A woman walks past you with a bucket, face expressionless, as though daring you to comment on the icicles hanging from her eyebrows. Let's talk historical accuracy for a moment. Viking longhouses were communal dwellings, often housing extended families and even animals during especially cold nights. Privacy? Forget it. Personal space, a 21st century luxury. And in the winter, when the livestock were brought inside for warmth, things got particularly aromatic. You're directed toward a side hut where you'll find your first task of the day, assisting with dressing the children for winter. A noble duty, except these children are feral. They screech, twist and kick like snow demons, and the layers of clothing are less cosy knitwear and more leather wraps held together by frostbite and hope. You're handed a woolen tunic, several pairs of socks, none matching, and a pair of boots made from something that clearly lost an argument with a knife. The boots, to be fair, are warm, but also smell like cheese that has become self-aware. You squeeze your feet in. Your toes, still emotionally recovering from their morning trauma, immediately rebel. Now, bundled and miserable, you step outside again and find yourself recruited for snow-clearing duty. The village paths are half buried, and someone has decided this is the perfect opportunity to bond over shared suffering. You're handed a crude wooden shovel, which looks like it was fashioned by someone who's only ever heard of tools described through interpretive dance. 10 minutes in, your hands are numb. 15 minutes in, your arms feel like wet noodles. 20 minutes in, you seriously consider just lying down in the snow and letting fate decide what happens next. And yet, here's the funny thing. This is normal. This is survival. Villages like this functioned because everyone contributed, even in the bitter cold, even when it felt impossible. Children gathered kindling, elders repaired tools, and guests like you, well, they learned quickly or froze trying. There's still debate among historians as to just how egalitarian Viking winter life really was. Some argue it was a fairly cooperative structure. Others suggest a more rigid hierarchy with women managing domestic labour and social systems, while men focused on hunting, trade, and being stubborn about frostbite. Either way, if you're hoping someone will offer to take your place, you'll be disappointed. You're part of the ecosystem now, friend. As you trudge back to the longhouse for a warm-up break, your breath puffing in the air like sad little clouds, you pass a circle of villagers crouched around something in the snow. They're laughing. This can't be good. You edge closer. It's a hole in the ice. A child leans over it, giggling as another tosses in a small stick. The stick vanishes instantly. You brace yourself. Fishing? You ask hopefully. No, comes the reply. It's a toilet. You back away slowly. And hey, if this moment charmed your heart, or gave you a delightful chill down your spine, whisper 1 in the comments below, or 2 if you're now seriously rethinking your admiration for Viking ruggedness. By the time you get back indoors, your cheeks are frozen, your boots are soaked, and your dignity has quietly excused itself to go live in a warmer century. You collapse near the fire and are rewarded with a ladle of something hot. It might be soup, it might be broth, it might be tea. You don't ask. You just sip, grimace, and pretend it's delicious. And yet, somewhere, Under the haze of smoke and the aching cold, you feel it. A strange kind of coziness. The kind born not from luxury but from endurance, from being here, against all odds, toe-nibbling children and all. You wake up again, not because you meant to, because someone sneezed directly into your hair. It's unclear what time it is. In the Viking winter village, time is more of a suggestion than a schedule. The sun barely rises above the horizon this time of year, and when it does, it slinks around like it's embarrassed to be here. You squint toward the door. It could be morning, it could also be Tuesday, possibly both. Your joints creak as you roll off the sleeping platform, displacing a chicken who glares at you with utter contempt. You don't even ask why the chicken is indoors, you already know the answer. Warmth. Chickens want warmth too. You step outside, bracing yourself for the cold, and yes, there it is again. That slap of frosted air that feels like it's been holding a grudge. Your face goes numb within seconds, your eyelashes freeze together. You're fairly certain your breath just formed a snowflake mid-air. Today's first joy? A walk to the village's outer wall to help clear snow from the top beams. Not for aesthetics, though you'll admit the whole snow-draped timber look is quaint in a postcardy way. No, this is to prevent the beams from snapping under the weight. Structural integrity, a phrase you never expected to associate with a stick and fur society, but here we are. You climb a not at all OSHA approved ladder using cold, creaky hands to hold on. From the top, the view is, well, white. Snow to the left, snow to the right, hills in the distance that may or may not contain wolves, or worse, raiders from another village who've run out of fermented fish and patience. As you begin pushing snow off the thatch with a long rake, a gust of wind carries half of it directly into your face. It's less of a gentle flurry and more of an avalanche to the soul. You blink snow from your eyes and sneeze with such force you nearly lose your footing. You cling to the beam like a very cold sloth and reflect on your life choices. Meanwhile, down below, someone is laughing. Loudly. You peer down and see two teens pointing at you like you're the morning's entertainment. One offers a helpful comment in Old Norse that roughly translates to, "Try not to die, outsider." A historical note while you contemplate a snow-induced breakdown. Viking villages often relied on cooperative labour to maintain structures during winter. Roofs were sloped and often thatched or covered in turf to help shed snow, but regular maintenance was essential to prevent collapse. Not to mention the smoke holes. They couldn't clog, or the entire longhouse would become a sauna of doom. After an hour of snow clearing and at least 3 icicle close calls, you clamber down, your fingers stiff, your nose bright red, and your dignity again missing in action. Someone presses a warm cloth into your hands. You press it to your face, nearly sobbing with gratitude. It smells faintly of goat. You don't care. Next, it's onto the pen to help check the livestock. You're introduced to an especially angry-looking sheep named Skjolder. You're told he bites. You don't ask why. You just avoid eye contact and hope he's distracted by someone else's shin today. You trudge through the animal enclosure, checking for signs of injury or cold stress. This mostly involves poking animals gently and hoping they don't retaliate. There's also the delightful task of clearing out frozen dung, which crunches under your boots like nature's least enjoyable granola bar. And of course, someone always draws a crude face in the frost on the water trough. Today it's a smiley Viking with crossed eyes and suspiciously large ears. You chuckle despite yourself, maybe because your brain is trying to fight off hypothermia with humour. You pause for a moment beside a cow whose nose is crusted with ice. She blinks at you, unimpressed. Somewhere in the distance, a child shrieks in joy or terror. It's hard to tell. You wonder if you've finally gone nose-blind to the smell of wet hay and livestock. By mid-morning, or at least what you assume is mid-morning based on the slightly lighter shade of grey sky, you return to the longhouse, stomping snow from your boots. Someone hands you a bowl of hot gruel. It's thick, grey, and unconvincingly described as nutrient-rich. You eat it anyway, thankful for the warmth and the suspicious lack of flavour. Scholars remain divided on just how nutritious Viking winter diets really were. Some believe the reliance on root vegetables, fish, preserved meats and grains offered a surprisingly balanced intake for the time. Others suggest winter malnutrition was common, with poorer households subsisting on whatever could be foraged, traded or rehydrated from last week's disappointment. You finish your gruel and sit near the fire. It's smoky and oddly comforting. The heat creeps slowly back into your fingers. A nearby elder begins to hum, And it's not quite a lullaby, but not quite a dirge either. Somewhere in between. The kind of song that reminds you everything is temporary, especially toes, if left uncovered in Viking winter. You lean back against the timber wall and close your eyes for a moment. Outside, the wind howls like a jealous ghost. Inside, someone snores, someone sneezes, and someone mumbles what might be a poem about onions. And you? You're still here, still cold, still exhausted, but you've survived another Viking morning. There's no way to sugarcoat this. Nature is actively trying to ruin you today. You wake up again because a goat steps on your hand. It's unclear how it got inside. It's also unclear whether this is the same goat from yesterday or a new one with equally poor boundaries. You hiss in pain, and the goat responds with a blank stare, then casually chews part of your blanket before sauntering off like it pays rent. Your hand is throbbing. Your knees ache. You haven't felt your toes since... ever. And yet, the village doesn't wait for your petty human discomforts. Today you've been assigned the privilege of latrine duty. You hear the news over a weak bowl of morning porridge. The consistency is somewhere between drywall paste and regret. You barely choke it down before a broad-shouldered woman claps you on the back and shoves a shovel into your frozen hands. "Outhouse path," she grunts. "Snow's high. Keep your boots on." Now, this would be a fine opportunity for some quiet reflection, were it not for the reality of what awaits you. You make your way down the winding path toward the outhouse. The snow is up to your thighs in some spots, which is not only exhausting to wade through, but also deeply unfair to your dignity. Every step is a gamble. Will you fall face first into a snowbank or just twist your ankle slightly and scream into the wind? By the time you reach the tiny outhouse, a squat timber hut with a crescent moon carved into its door, you're sweating under your furs, even in the below-freezing air. You throw open the door and, yes, it's somehow worse than expected. The seat is a wide wooden plank with a hole in it. The hole steams faintly, and not in a comforting way. There's a layer of frost coating every surface inside, and what appears to be a frozen spider clinging to the ceiling like it too is reconsidering its life choices. You shovel the snow around the base, clear the walkway, and scatter a bucket of straw and ashes inside to keep things from freezing over, at least not immediately. Every Viking knows, nothing ruins a morning faster than having to chip a hole in last night's disaster, just to get on with your business. There's a lightness to the work, though. Maybe because no one wants to be the one who complains about toilet duty. So you joke with the others, trade sarcastic grumbles, and laugh when one poor soul slips and lands rear first in a snowdrift. He takes it like a champ, flailing dramatically, then posing like a fallen hero. And maybe, just maybe, there's a spark of warmth in all this cold. The kind of shared suffering that binds people together. You, who once considered walking in a chilly breeze the height of winter hardship, are now part of something raw and ridiculous and real. Fun fringe fact. While some Viking settlements used outhouses, others dug shallow trenches that were periodically moved. Archaeological sites in Denmark have even revealed ancient toilet latrine layers in soil samples, complete with parasite eggs, suggesting that hygiene wasn't exactly top tier, but it was present. You finish your task, breathing heavily, fingers aching, shovel covered in things you'd rather not name. Someone tosses you a rag and a water skin. You wipe your brow. You survive. Again. Returning to the longhouse, you're offered a bit of dried fish. It cracks like a cracker, smells like a harbour, and tastes like despair. But you eat it. Because calories are survival, and your body needs fuel to keep shivering at maximum performance. You sit near the hearth, soaking in the heat and wondering how much longer winter will last. The answer, always longer than you'd like. A new voice enters the room, a visiting trader wrapped in blue-dyed wool and carrying a sack that jingles faintly with trinkets. He speaks of coastal villages, sea ice, and a rumoured bear the size of a cow. You're half convinced he's lying, but no one challenges him. Everyone just nods as if to say, yes, this too is winter. It makes men talk like sagas. You stifle a yawn. There's no time for a nap. Someone is calling you to help refill the water barrel. That means a trip to the well. Again. But just before you go, you lean back against the wall and smile. Just a little. Not because you're enjoying this exactly, but because you haven't frozen solid. Not yet, anyway. And hey, if this strange tale has made you smile just a little, tap 3 in the comments below. Or if it's left you shivering in sympathy, let us know with a 4. I love seeing what kind of Viking spirit you all carry. Outside, the wind kicks up again, howling through the eaves like a lost god. You wrap your cloak tighter and step back into the cold. You've still got work to do. You know it's going to be a rough day when your first task involves breaking ice just to wash your face. You shuffle toward the wash station, if you can call it that. It's a wide wooden basin nestled beneath a gnarled pine tree that seems to lean ever so slightly in judgment. A thin sheet of ice has formed over the water, and a wooden ladle sits frozen at the edge, like it gave up halfway through its job and decided to embrace retirement. A stocky man beside you grunts, takes a small axe, and gives the ice a casual whack. It cracks with a reluctant shatter. He gestures for you to go first. You reach into the frigid water, immediately regretting every decision that led you to this point. Your hands seize up like angry crabs. You scoop a ladle full and splash it on your face. The shock is not invigorating. It's more like having your skin insulted in 12 different dialects of frost. Your eyebrows freeze halfway to surprise. A woman nearby chuckles and offers you a scrap of linen. "It's good for the soul," she says. You mutter something about your soul filing a complaint. But like everything here, it's tradition. Viking hygiene was surprisingly decent for the era, at least by medieval standards. They bathed weekly, logadaga, or bath day, gave us the modern word Saturday. But during the dead of winter, bathing was more like survival roulette with bonus frostbite. Still, cleanliness mattered. Lice and skin infections were common problems, so even if water was scarce or frozen, some level of hygiene was expected. Combs, tweezers, and even ear spoons were frequently found in burial sites. You, unfortunately, have access to none of these, just icy water and a prayer. After patting your face with a cloth that feels like it's been used to sand boats, you're sent to help with the midday meal prep, which sounds cozy until you realise it involves hacking apart a solid block of yesterday's stew. You're handed a knife that looks more like a rusted suggestion than an actual utensil, and told to shave off the good parts. The stew brick contains mystery chunks, some root vegetable, possibly turnip or parsnip, plus something that may have once been fish, but could also be squirrel. You don't ask, you just scrape. The hearth is roaring today, which is a blessing and a curse. The warmth is welcome, but the room fills with smoke so thick you could bottle it and call it Eau de Viking nostril. Your eyes water, your nose runs. You accidentally inhale a piece of ash and spend 5 full minutes trying to cough your soul back into place. At your elbow, an elderly woman is grinding grain with a stone. Her hands are gnarled but steady. She hums softly, something ancient and rhythmical. You match her tempo with your chopping. There's comfort in the repetition, even if your fingers are half frozen and your stomach is rumbling like a thunder god's bad mood. Fun fringe fact: Vikings ate surprisingly well when stores held up. Their diet included grains, dried fish, cured meats, and whatever vegetables they managed to store before the frost hit. Winter stews often combined all of the above, simmered over fires for days. The result was filling, if not exactly flavourful. Think prehistoric slow cooker, minus the seasoning. As you stir today's thawed meal, which now resembles something between soup and apology, you overhear a heated debate near the fire. 2 men are arguing over whether a neighbour's cow is cursed or just deeply uncooperative. You want to interject with logic, but honestly, that cow did look at you funny. You sit to eat with the rest of the household. Everyone shares from a central bowl, dipping chunks of hard bread into the slurry. You copy them, trying not to grimace. Someone slides you a small piece of dried apple, likely saved from autumn's last harvest. You nod your thanks like it's gold. The mood around the hearth is subdued today. The wind outside howls intermittently, rattling the shutters. Everyone seems to glance at the door when it does, just for a moment, as if expecting someone, or something. You don't ask. You finish your bowl and hand it off for cleaning, which means dunking it in the same basin from earlier. This time, someone's added a fistful of pine needles to freshen it up. It doesn't work. You crawl back to your place on the sleeping platform, cradling your aching hands and wondering how you'll ever regain the feeling in your fingertips. Across the room, a child is telling a story about a talking moose who teaches people how to fish. No one questions it. It's winter. Sanity is optional. You rest your head on a bundle of furs. Your stomach is fullish. Your skin is only partially frostbitten. You're covered in smoke, stew juice, and just a little shame. But you're still here. You've endured another day of goat attacks, soup excavation, and ice-based face trauma. And honestly, that's more Viking than most. Your dreams are strange. You drift through a forest made of frozen turnips. A reindeer offers you a pair of socks. A bearded man shouts, "You're cooking it wrong," while holding a fish that screams in Latin. You wake to the sound of coughing, so much coughing. Someone across the room is hacking like they swallowed a pine cone. The baby's crying again, of course, and someone somewhere is very audibly snoring in a pattern that suggests they may be summoning something. You sit up, blink the sleep from your eyes, and realise that despite everything, you might have actually dozed off. Outside, it's grey. Again. The same weary colour as wet wool and stale breath. But inside, the hearth crackles and pops. There's a warmth here, not just physical, but social. People bustling, talking, complaining about how cold their backs are. You're beginning to understand the rhythms. Today's offering for breakfast is, well, not inspiring. A bowl of oat mush, pale as moonlight and about as flavourful. It jiggles faintly when you poke it, which feels like a red flag. You try to chew. It resists. Eventually you give up and just swallow it like a brave little seal. Next comes the dreaded task of hauling firewood. Now, if you're picturing a pleasant stroll into a snowy forest to gather neat little logs and stack them artfully, think again. You're handed a sled and a dull axe pointed vaguely in the direction of a distant tree line and told, "Don't fall in the river," which is encouraging. You shuffle through knee-deep snow for what feels like an hour. Every step is a negotiation. You consider turning back, just pretending you got lost. But then you remember the longhouse, the hungry hearth, the judging chicken, the snoring possible demon. You sigh and continue. When you finally reach the tree line, you select a thin pine and begin to hack at it with the axe. It's less like chopping and more like tenderly persuading the tree to consider retirement. After several eternities and exactly zero visible progress, you manage to crack it enough that it leans dramatically and falls directly onto your foot. You shout. The tree does not apologise. You drag it back, limbs trembling, face numb, boots soaked through. Halfway there, your sled tips over and the tree rolls off, laughing at you in bark. You reload it with the sigh of 1,000 ancestors and trudge on. Fun historical fact. Firewood was a full-time necessity in Norse winters. Hearths burned constantly to maintain warmth, cook food, and fend off the mind-melting despair of perpetual darkness. Wood gathering was a communal task, and failure meant more than cold. It meant disease, hunger, or even death. No pressure. By the time you return, you're too tired to speak. You collapse by the door. Someone grunts in approval and tosses you a piece of dried fish as a reward. You gnaw at it like a feral otter and try to stop shivering. Later, as the sun pretends to show itself behind the clouds, you're invited to warm up in the forge. Now this sounds promising. Heat, light, glowing metal. You limp over eagerly, boots squelching, and duck into the blacksmith's hut. The air inside is so hot and dense it hits you like a wall. Your eyes blur, your nose runs, you're immediately sweating through your furs. The blacksmith, an absolute mountain of a man named Eirik, nods once, then hands you a hammer, then points to a glowing chunk of metal on the anvil. Hit it. You do. Once. It bounces. He sighs. He shows you the motion. Steady. Rhythmic. Sharp. You try again, this time with more confidence. The hammer rings true. The metal sparks. You feel like a Norse god for exactly 4 seconds before the hammer slips, clinks sideways, and almost strikes your own knee. Eric raises an eyebrow. You decide that's enough forging for one day. The forge, you discover, is not just a place for tools and weapons. It's social too. Villagers come and go, warming their hands, trading gossip, sharing stories. One woman mentions her sister saw a troll last week near the river. Everyone nods solemnly. No one laughs. And here's a fun fringe detail. While trolls and spirits may seem like fantasy, belief in such beings shaped how Norse people viewed the world. Cold spots in the forest, spirits, strange noises in the longhouse, spirits, a goat giving you side-eye, probably spirits. The line between the physical and the supernatural was blurry, especially in the long dark of winter. You stay just long enough to warm your toes, then return to the longhouse. Someone has placed a stone near the hearth for you to sit on. You smile. It's still cold, but a little less so. You've made it through another brutal, bizarre wood-hauling day. Your hands are blistered, your legs are trembling, but the fire crackles, the stew bubbles, and a child is gently drawing on your boot with a bit of charcoal. You don't even stop him. At this point, you figure you've earned a custom design. You've only just sat down to enjoy the modest luxury of not moving when someone nudges your arm and says sheep duty. You stare at them. Surely this is a joke. You just hauled a literal tree. You almost forged your own kneecap into an axe blade. You deserve at least half an hour of doing absolutely nothing, maybe even full-on horizontal time. But no, the sheep are calling, and they are not known for their patience. You rise with a groan, your legs staging a formal protest with every creaking joint. Stepping outside again, you're greeted by what can only be described as blizzard light. Not a full storm, not calm, just relentless sideways snow that hits your face like freezing rice thrown by vengeful wedding guests. Out by the livestock pens, the sheep are packed into a huddle, so tight it could be mistaken for a single woolly entity. One bleats, and they all twitch in response. You climb the pen gate and hop in, immediately regretting your decision as your foot lands in something warm and not snow. You do not investigate. The goal is to check for frostbite, injury, and apparently bad attitudes. You run your hands over the animals, who react with varying levels of cooperation. One tries to eat your glove, another headbutts you gently in the stomach, then stares as if daring you to retaliate. You learn a few things quickly. 1. Sheep are heavier than they look. 2. Sheep hate having their hooves touched. 3. You are not good at sheep diplomacy. Still, this work mattered. Livestock were survival. Viking families depended on sheep for wool, meat, milk, and manure. Winter was hardest on the animals, and losing even one could mean serious trouble come spring. So they were watched, warmed, and occasionally sung to, though no one seems to be doing that today, probably because their vocal cords are frozen. After nearly an hour, your arms are numb, your nose is redder than a drunken reindeer, and your boots are now officially more manure than leather. You climb back out, but not before one particularly malicious sheep gives you a farewell nip on the thigh. You salute it, partly in respect, partly because you've lost control of your limbs. Back at the Longhouse, someone hands you a cup of warm broth. You cradle it like it's made of gold and dreams. It smells vaguely of onion and regret, but you're not picky. A young girl near the hearth is carving bone into a comb. You watch her hands, small but deft, shaping the brittle material with quiet intensity. She catches you looking and smiles shyly. You want to try? She asks. Why not, you think? It's sitting, it's warm, and it doesn't involve being attacked by sheep. She hands you a bone shard and a knife the size of your pinky. You grip it carefully, carving slow, shallow lines. It's hard. Your fingers are stiff, and the bone is slippery. But there's something oddly satisfying about it. Scrape by scrape, a pattern emerges. Not a good one, but recognisably lines. The girl nods approvingly. Not bad. Scholars remain divided on the extent of Viking artisanry in daily life. While much is known about their grand shipbuilding and metalwork, less is documented about smaller crafts like bone carving. Still, archaeological finds, combs, buttons, and tiny figurines suggest that even in the freezing dark, art had its place. You continue carving as the day wears on. The sound of the knife against bone is soft, rhythmic. Someone begins humming again. Perhaps the same elder as before. The tune is different this time, slower. It almost feels like a lullaby, though it might also be a recipe for smoked eel. You can't tell. Outside, the wind howls and snow piles up in quiet fury. Inside, the light flickers. You stretch your legs, admire your terrible comb, and look up just in time to see two children carrying in armfuls of snow. Don't ask, someone says before you can. So you don't. You just nod and sip your broth. Another hour passes and you realise something remarkable. You haven't thought about your phone, or your inbox, or anything beyond the fact that your left sock is still mildly damp, and your right thigh still remembers the wrath of one Viking sheep. You're tired, sore, half frozen. But weirdly, you're okay. You might even call this peaceful, just not out loud. The sheep might hear you. You think you're finally getting the hang of this, until someone calls your name and says, "Forge again." Not the forge, a forge. Turns out the village has two. One for serious smithing, the one where Eric looms and hammers with terrifying precision, and one smaller, more makeshift forge built into a half-sheltered hut at the edge of the compound. This one is less about weapons and more about repairing tools, sharpening knives, and warming the limbs of villagers too stubborn to stay inside. You follow the voice to the small forge, which hisses and pops like it's permanently annoyed. The hut leans in every direction except vertical, and the roof is held down with rocks. Big rocks. You don't ask questions. Inside, it's less like stepping into warmth, and more like being swallowed by a spicy, smoky dragon. The heat wraps around you instantly, chasing away the chill in your bones and replacing it with a light sweat that smells of iron and firewood. A thin man named Olvir waves you over. He has a beard that looks like it's trying to escape and a singed tunic with enough holes to qualify as a strainer. He hands you a dented knife and points to a sharpening stone. "You've got good fingers," he says. "Not smart, but good." You choose to take this as a compliment. Sharpening is an oddly meditative task. It's repetitive, slow, rhythmic. You drag the blade across the stone, listen to the scrape, check the edge, repeat. Outside, wind howls. Inside, it's just stone, steel, and your own breath. At one point, Olvir tosses a broken cooking spit onto the coals and lets it glow red before pulling it out with tongs and hammering it back into shape. Sparks fly in slow, golden arcs. He hums while he works. Something old and tuneless, like the forge itself is singing through him. As you keep working, other villagers drift in. A woman with a sickle that needs straightening. A boy whose axe is missing a wedge. A man with a hook that might have once been part of a plough or a torture device. No one's really sure. This is what the forge is for. Not just heat, not just tools, but connection. Fun fact, Viking-era blacksmiths weren't just metal workers. They were viewed as holding a semi-sacred role. Ironworking was mysterious and powerful, especially to those who saw the transformation of metal as close to magic. In some sagas, smiths are portrayed as both craftsmen and seers. Olvir, with his twitchy eye and ash-covered fingernails, definitely fits the type. At one point he gestures to the flames and says, "You hear them?" You pause. "The flames?" you ask. He nods solemnly. Sometimes they speak. You do not press the issue. By midday you've sharpened 5 knives, bent 2, and completely ruined 1 pair of tongs. You're given a ladle of warm milk with herbs in it. It tastes faintly like moss and sour cheese, but it helps the headache you didn't realise was forming. Back in the longhouse, the atmosphere is livelier than usual. Someone's brought in dried berries from storage, and a game has broken out near the fire. Children are tossing carved knuckle bones, sheep ankle joints polished smooth, and placing bets with pebbles. You're invited to play. You agree, mostly to avoid more work. The game seems simple. Toss the bones into the air, catch as many as you can on the back of your hand. Seems manageable. You go first. Toss, fumble, drop all 5. The kids laugh. Second round, 2 stay on your hand, but 1 bounces off your nose. More laughter. Third round, you catch all 5, then sneeze violently from the dust and send them flying into the stew pot. Chaos ensues. The children howl with glee. Someone fishes them out with a ladle. You've lost spectacularly. But you've also become the evening's entertainment, which apparently earns you a sliver of dried apple and an honorary cheer. Knucklebone games were common across the ancient world. Vikings carved them from sheep or goat joints, sometimes adding symbols or numbers. They were used not just for games, but in some cases divination, tossing the bones and reading the patterns like a primitive magic 8 ball. You return to your corner by the fire, stomach warm, hands calloused, cheeks pink from heat and embarrassment. Someone tosses a fur at your head. It's meant as a pillow. You accept it with a grunt of thanks. Outside, the sky's already darkening again. Or maybe it never brightened. Time is a blur in Viking winter. You just mark the passing of tasks. Forge, food, fire, failure at children's games. You settle in. The fire flickers. Someone begins singing softly. The melody is wordless, drifting. And in that moment, you almost forget the cold. Almost. Today begins with a sheep in the doorway. Again. You open your eyes and there it is, just standing halfway inside the longhouse, steam curling from its nostrils like a tiny judgmental furnace. You make eye contact. It makes a sound like a sarcastic sigh and saunters in fully, plopping down near the fire like it owns the place. No one seems surprised. You sit up slowly, the furs tangled around you like a boa constrictor that lost interest halfway through the job. Your body is sore, your hair smells like smoke-dried onions, and your hands feel like bags of frozen lentils. Good morning. The longhouse is bustling already. Someone is roasting something that might be a fish, might be a root vegetable, or might be a boot. Either way, it smells edible, which is enough these days. You drag yourself to your feet, wondering if the concept of sleeping in existed in Viking society, or if everyone was just permanently operating on the schedule of angry barn owls. Spoiler, they were. Viking winters didn't allow for laziness. Every moment of daylight, what little there was, had to be used. That meant chores, repairs, survival. Maybe a little quiet existential dread when time allowed. Today's task is herding. Now, herding sounds pleasant, bucolic, pastoral. You might picture a gentle stroll with docile animals and the occasional poetic sigh at a snow-dappled field. In reality, you're trying to coax several hundred pounds of shaggy, stubborn livestock through 2 feet of snow while they actively try to outwit you. You're handed a stick and told, keep them together, don't let them eat the woodpile, or each other. You nod solemnly, you're not prepared. The herd, 4 sheep, 2 goats, and a confused-looking pig, lumbers out of the pen like a woolly parade of bad decisions. You follow behind, stick in hand, already regretting this. The snow is deep and crusted, the wind has picked up again, and the goats, well, let's just say they've got opinions. One makes a break for the longhouse. Another charges toward what looks like a promising patch of frozen something. The pig simply stops and lies down in protest. You try calling to them. You try pleading. You try bribing them with a piece of turnip. Eventually you find the only method that works. Wild, flailing arm gestures, and the authoritative shout of someone who is absolutely not in charge, but feels like they should be. The livestock move, slowly, grudgingly. One goat tries to climb you. You survive. And here's a curious thing. Archaeologists still debate how much free grazing Vikings allowed during harsh winters. Some sources suggest that livestock were kept entirely indoors or in small paddocks. Others believe short foraging walks like this one were common to allow the animals exercise and fresh air. You're currently hoping it was rare because this is exhausting. After what feels like several lifetimes, the herd is corralled near the forge, nibbling at frozen hay and grunting. You lean against the fence, panting, your clothes soaked through with snow and sweat. One of the goats gives you a look that says, "You call that herding?" Back in the longhouse, you collapse near the fire. Someone hands you a piece of hard bread that might actually just be a rock. You gnaw on it anyway. It gives your teeth something to do besides chatter. An elder begins telling a story, something about a man who once tried to ride a moose across a frozen fjord. It ends poorly. Everyone laughs. You try, but your lungs are still recovering from goat-activated cardio. Later, you're pulled aside to help repair some of the carved wooden bowls that have cracked in the cold. You sit cross-legged with a small kit of pitch, twine, and thin wooden splints. The work is precise, almost calming, and warm, which is key. The firelight flickers across the walls, casting strange shadows that look like giants dancing or chickens doing interpretive poetry. You drift into the task, stitching broken wood with your half-frozen fingers. Someone starts humming again, always the humming. It's different every time, but always oddly comforting, like the longhouse itself has a pulse. Then comes a rare luxury, a moment of doing nothing. You lean back against the wall. The room is still. Outside, the snow continues to fall in that slow, dreamy way. One of the goats has snuck back in. No one moves to stop it. You stretch out your legs, let your eyes drift half-closed. Your knees ache, your hands are cracked. But you've made it through another absurd, freezing, wool-covered Viking day. Somehow, you're still standing. Or, well, slumping. Close enough. You've just about drifted into a state of semi-conscious bliss. Body wrapped in half-thawed furs, mind floating somewhere between a goose and a lullaby, when a pot crashes to the floor and the entire longhouse jolts awake. It's not an alarm, not really. Just someone trying to hang a clay pot from a beam, failing spectacularly, and then muttering what is probably a Viking expletive. But in a world where silence is rare, even that is enough to stir the stew-scented air and send everyone bustling again. Today, you're told, is a crafts and mending day. This sounds nice, gentle, peaceful, possibly even fun, until you realise it means sitting outside and carving bone. You trudge out into the brittle morning light, guided by a red-nosed teenager who smells vaguely of elk and burnt soup. She leads you to a bench covered in fur, bone shards, and the world's dullest-looking knives. "We're making needles," she says cheerfully, then drops a handful of ribs into your lap and walks away. Needles. From ribs. You sigh, pick up a shard, and begin carving. It's not glamorous. It's not warm. It's definitely not easy. The bone is dense and resists every movement. Your knife slips, scrapes, and, more than once, bites into your glove. You're fairly sure your thumb is slowly becoming one with the handle. The teenager wanders by now and then, offering helpful commentary like, "That one's ugly and you're bleeding," and yet, there's something oddly satisfying about it. You're surrounded by others doing the same. The rhythmic scrape of knife on bone fills the courtyard. Some villagers hum, others chat about old fishing spots, distant cousins, or how a neighbour's goat definitely isn't normal. One man claims he saw the goat reading runes last week. No one corrects him. Historically, bone tools were a major part of Viking daily life. Metal was valuable. Too valuable to waste on small items like needles, awls, and buttons. Bones, however, were abundant and durable. Women and children often made these tools, turning animal remains into everyday objects with surprising precision. You, however, are currently making a lopsided toothpick. You pause to flex your fingers. They ache in ways you didn't know fingers could. Your back is beginning to stage a minor protest. A wind picks up and blows snow directly into your ear. You mutter something modern and deeply un-Viking under your breath. Eventually you do produce a single, half-decent needle. It's crooked, slightly chipped, but has an eye that you might be able to thread if you squint and pray. You hold it up for approval. The teenager nods once. "Meh," she says. "High praise. You're rewarded with a cup of something warm. It's described as herbal broth, which seems generous. It tastes like boiled socks and sadness, but it heats your belly. You drink it all. Later, you help hang some of the finished bone tools near the hearth to dry. The display is humble. Rows of needles, combs, pins. Practical. Quietly beautiful. They don't shimmer like gold or gleam like silver, but these things are the heartbeat of the village. They hold clothes together, stitch wounds, bind sails. And that's the thing about Viking life. It wasn't all sword fights and sea spray. It was mostly this. Cold fingers, careful work, shared effort. Even the epics are quiet here. They hum through the room in the way an old woman tightens thread or a child sharpens a spoon. The afternoon drifts by slowly like a lullaby made of chores. You spend a little time by the door mending a leather strap with your wonky needle. You stab yourself once. Curse softly. The goat watches from the corner. You can tell it's judging. When the shadows lengthen and the fire begins to dominate the room again, the atmosphere shifts. Slower, sleepier, softer. A man picks up a lyre and begins to strum it gently. The sound is warm, dry, wooden, like music made from trees and snow. He sings a song about a woman who climbed a glacier to find the sun. She found it. It was asleep. She poked it until it got up and apologized. Everyone chuckles. You smile. You look down at your hands. Cracked, stained, full of tiny bone splinters. You've carved. You've stitched. You've made something that will outlast the fire in the hearth. You're exhausted, but somehow fulfilled. Smoke. Always smoke. It clings to your clothes, your hair, your soul. It drifts through the longhouse in slow ribbons, curling around beams and slipping into every fold of fur. It's not the rich, woody kind of smoke you might associate with campfires and marshmallows. It's the eye-watering, throat-scorching haze of a hearth that never truly stops burning and a roof hole that never quite does its job. You blink your stinging eyes and try to adjust. It's not even a roaring fire, just a few sullen logs nestled in coals, radiating a heat that never quite reaches your feet. Someone ladles you a drink. It's warm and vaguely brown, like tea made from leaves that gave up on life. You sip it cautiously. It might be mushroom broth, or bark water, or, well, let's just say it's warm. Today is story day. A skald has come. He's older than snow, with a beard that seems to predate fire, and a cloak made from mismatched scraps of fur, linen, and what might be old sailcloth. He settles near the hearth. clears his throat like thunder through gravel, and begins to speak. His voice is soft, raspy. You lean in instinctively. Everyone does. He tells of Odin and his missing eye, of the ravens that spy for him, of Yggdrasil, the world tree, whose roots drink from wells deeper than time. He speaks of Thor's goats, which he can eat and resurrect so long as he doesn't break the bones. You glance nervously at the soup pot. The room is still. Even the children are quiet. The smoke adds to the ambiance, turning the longhouse into a sort of drifting dreamscape. Shadows dancing, light flickering, every surface blurry with heat and ash. At one point, someone passes you a piece of dried fruit. You nibble on it slowly, trying not to crunch too loudly over the school's murmured cadence. The story shifts. Now it's about a mortal man who challenged a mountain to a staring contest. It goes poorly. But not immediately. There's a whole sequence involving trickery, pride, and an enchanted elk that speaks only in riddles. You're not sure if the lesson is about humility or hunting ethics, but the man's eventual fate, buried under a 1,000-year snowdrift with only his thoughts and one mildly sympathetic vole, is memorable. Historically speaking, skalds were revered in Norse culture. They were more than poets. They were memory keepers, entertainers, and news carriers. Through intricate metre and stylized language, they preserved not only myth, but real-world events, weaving history and heroism into the same thread. What you're hearing now might not be exactly accurate. The elk seems suspiciously modern in its sass, but the tone, the rhythm, the reverence for language, it feels true. And in a society without paper, storytelling was the archive, the oral Wikipedia of the fjords. Halfway through the tale, the fire pops loudly and sends a burst of sparks into the air. A child squeaks. The skald doesn't pause. He just adjusts the pitch of his voice, turns the moment into a tension beat. Everyone leans closer again. You, slumped against a timber beam, feel yourself drifting. Not from boredom, but from the rhythm. The words sway like waves. You could almost fall asleep like this, head full of ancient trees and magical goats. But then, the punchline. The mountain wins. Of course it does. It's a mountain. The longhouse erupts in quiet chuckles. The skald grins a toothless grin and takes a swig of something strong-smelling from a horn. He leans back, satisfied. A few people clap. A few simply nod. A few mutter, "He made that one up." But no one leaves. No one complains. Later you find yourself reciting the last lines quietly under your breath. Something about the vole. Something about knowing when to blink. You're handed a bit of cloth to wipe the soot from your face. You do so, only to reveal a new layer of ash beneath. It's fine. At this point, you're 50% fur and 10% chimney. You glance around. People are starting to drift back to tasks, mending cloaks, stirring soup, patching boots. But the hush of the story still lingers, like a melody that's ended but hums quietly in the walls. You step outside for a breath of fresh air. Well, less smoky air. The sky's steel grey. The snow has stopped, but the wind hasn't. It brushes your face like a cold hand trying to remind you who's in charge. You stand there a while thinking about world trees and one-eyed gods and talking animals that may or may not be exaggerations, and you think, maybe it doesn't matter if the stories are true, they feel true. They fit here, in this place of bone and frost and fire. And when you return inside, blinking away the wind, you realise something odd. You kind of want to hear another. There's a bowl in front of you. It's steaming faintly, which is a good sign. Less good is the colour. A pale greyish brown, like muddy snow, or a broth that's lost the will to be soup. You stare into it for a moment, searching for anything identifiable. Carrot? Meat? A suggestion of flavour? You find a sliver of something that might be parsnip, or bark, possibly both. You take a cautious sip. It's warm, which is its greatest strength. The taste is elusive. Not bad exactly, but hauntingly neutral. The sort of flavour that barely registers, like an idea of food you once had during a nap. You chew a piece that might be root vegetable, or maybe just a very soft bone. Across from you, a woman with cheeks as red as berries gives you a grin. "It's better than last week's," she says. "That one turned blue." You nod. Politely. You keep eating. This is dinner. Stew was the Viking winter mainstay, a catch-all culinary experiment that simmered endlessly in the communal pot. Ingredients varied wildly depending on what was left, what hadn't rotted, and who was willing to share. Root vegetables, dried fish, slivers of old smoked meat, wild herbs, and occasionally things best left unnamed. And here's the kicker. It wasn't always freshly made. Often the pot stayed on the fire for days or weeks. People just kept adding to it, topping it up, stirring it through, occasionally removing the mysterious floating things and pretending not to see them. Scholars still debate whether this continuous stew method was hygienic brilliance or digestive roulette. The jury's out on whether Viking bellies were made of iron or just used to disappointment. Someone offers you a slab of dried bread to dip. It's hard enough to qualify as a blunt weapon, but after dunking it in the stew a while, it softens into something edible. You chew thoughtfully, trying not to think about the crunch. The Longhouse is full tonight. More villagers have come in from outer huts and shelters. The air is thick with smoke, chatter, and that oddly comforting stew aroma. Part onion, part ash, part mystery. You find yourself wedged between two burly men, each balancing their bowls with expert care, and each emitting low, satisfied grunts after every bite. One turns to you and asks if you've ever eaten fermented herring. You say no. He grins. Then tonight, you're lucky. A child darts past you, chasing a wooden wheel toy. A dog barks once, then goes back to sleep. A man on the far side is carving something long and thin. Maybe a flute, maybe a spear, maybe a ladle. You can't tell. He seems happy either way. And you? You're still eating the stew. You've reached a thick section now, where a meaty chunk lurks beneath the surface. You stab it with your spoon and bring it to your lips. You pause. It's fish. You hope it's fish. It has a slightly sour edge that could suggest fermentation, or just age. You swallow. It goes down surprisingly easily. Maybe you're adapting. Maybe your taste buds have fled. Still, there's comfort in the heat. The warmth in your chest. The way your breath steams in front of your nose and the fire glows faintly orange against the walls. You're not full, but you're not hungry. And in this place that's practically luxury. Across the hearth, a group is laughing over a joke you didn't catch. You smile anyway. The scald from earlier is humming again, wordless, low, like the wind through a pine grove. One of the elders claps his hands in time. You finish your stew, every last bit. You even scrape the bottom of the bowl with your bread rock just in case there's flavour down there. There isn't. But the act feels rewarding. A woman takes your bowl to clean it, meaning it will be dunked in water with pine needles and rubbed with a cloth that hasn't been dry since the last solstice. You thank her anyway. You stretch your legs and let yourself lean against the timber wall. It creaks gently with your weight. The goat, yes, that one, is back and trying to chew your boot. You nudge it away. It stares. You blink first. And as the night settles in, as the last light from outside fades into icy blue, you realise something unexpected. You kind of like the stew. You awake shivering. Not because you've been uncovered. Your furs are still wrapped around you like a very reluctant burrito, but because the temperature has dropped even further. Somehow, in defiance of logic, physics, and your will to survive, the cold has found a new depth. Your breath fogs in the air, your eyelashes have frosted together again. Your toes have stopped sending status reports. Someone nearby is making tea, or maybe just boiling pine needles and pretending. The smell is sharp, woody, and oddly comforting. You sit up slowly, joints creaking like old hinges, and notice a small crowd gathered near the hearth. One of the younger boys is hiccuping uncontrollably, curled in a bundle of cloaks and furs. A woman is rubbing his back, murmuring something soothing. "Too cold," she mutters. "Too dry. Too little food." You recognise the symptoms. The cold has caught up to him. Not frostbite, but something subtler. Dehydration, fatigue, malnutrition. A common cocktail in a Viking winter. It hits children hardest. The adults? They just push through, because what else is there? You shuffle over and hand the woman your bit of pine broth. She takes it with a nod, presses the warm cup to the boy's lips. He sips, hiccups again, then lets out a breath that sounds like it came from someone twice his size. His eyes flutter closed. Sleep, maybe. Or the closest thing to it. You return to your corner, deeply aware of how fragile everything is. The longhouse, the fire, the food stores, the bodies, the mines. Even the sun seems hesitant these days, showing up for shorter and shorter appearances like a reluctant guest. Later, as the boy rests, a few villagers begin discussing his condition. Theories abound. Too many turnips, says one. Not enough fish, says another. He walked through the smoke wrong, suggests a third, somehow seriously. A woman nods solemnly. Could be the Draga. You perk up. The what? She lowers her voice. The dead. Sometimes they don't stay buried. If you don't burn their nails or tie down their arms, you stare. She shrugs. Or it's just winter. Welcome to the wonderful world of Viking folk medicine. Scholars remain divided on the line between Viking medical knowledge and superstition. While evidence exists of herbal remedies, minor surgeries, and bone setting, many illnesses were attributed to spirits, curses, or the wrath of gods. The Draugr, undead beings who rose from their graves to torment the living, were blamed for everything from nightmares to livestock failure. Sometimes, when nothing else made sense, people just assumed a ghost had gotten uppity. You shift closer to the fire, half expecting a skeleton to come tap you on the shoulder. You're offered a job to distract yourself, drying fish strips. It sounds simple. Sit by the warm coals, hang thin slices of fish on a rack, and flip them occasionally. And sure, it is simple, except the smell is something truly unholy. Like the ocean took a personal grudge against your nostrils and left a rotting love letter, you hang the strips anyway, because food is food, and someone will eat it. Possibly you, eventually. Next to you, a woman sharpens a bone needle on a rock. She pauses, looks at you and says, "You're turning blue." You glance down. Your fingers are pale, very pale, maybe blue. She pulls a fur off her shoulders and tosses it around you without waiting for a thank you. "Sit closer to the fire," she says, "or you'll start seeing things." You scoot nearer. The heat soaks slowly into your skin, and you do start to feel better. But you can't help wondering, how close have you come to the edge? A fringe detail. Some Norse texts describe ice madness, a kind of seasonal delirium that set in after too many dark days, too little food, and too much cold. Stories told of men walking into snowbanks thinking they saw cities of gold, or women trying to cook rocks because they looked like bread. Whether these were exaggerations, metaphors, or literal incidents, scholars are still unsure. You wouldn't be surprised if they were all three. You spend the rest of the afternoon half dozing near the fire, the stink of fish in your nose, the warmth finally soaking into your spine. Someone starts to sing again, a low lilting tune in a minor key. No one joins in, but no one stops them either. The song fills the air like smoke, curling up toward the rafters and staying there. By nightfall, the boy has stopped hiccuping. He's eating a bit of bread, holding it in both hands like it's sacred. The woman beside him smiles. You smile too. The ghost can wait. You're halfway through rubbing warmth into your fingers when a loud thump echoes from the far side of the longhouse. Everyone turns. Two men are standing over a barrel, wooden, old, clearly leaking. One of them is grinning like he's just solved cold fusion. The other is holding a ladle like it's a weapon. And then the first man says something that sounds like, "Thor's toenails make it snow." You blink. You weren't expecting philosophy this evening. The longhouse erupts into argument. Not shouting, yet, but the kind of tense, passionate bickering that only surfaces after too many days trapped inside with stew and goats. Someone demands proof. Another insists the evidence is in the clouds. A third begins chanting the names of the gods alphabetically, just to derail the conversation. You scoot closer because this is clearly going to be better than anything on 9th century television. The original statement, yes, that Thor's toenails cause snowfall, came from a man named Arngeir, whose beard is currently frosted at the tips, and whose expression suggests he's very serious about his theory. He begins outlining it with great enthusiasm. "You see," he says, "every time Thor walks, he shakes the sky, and when he trims his toenails, the clippings fall into the clouds and become snowflakes." A young woman nearby frowns. "Wouldn't that mean snow is foot shavings?" A ripple of dismay passes through the room. Arngeir doubles down. "It's sacred snow," someone snorts. "Sacred toe snow?" And just like that, the debate splinters into warring camps. There's Team Toenail, who argue that snow is divine debris. Team Logical, who insist that weather has something to do with clouds and cold and wind and boring stuff. And then there's Team Distraction, who just want someone to break out the dried apples again. You find yourself giggling. It's quiet, breathy, half-stifled, but real. The first real laugh you've had since that goat stole your sock. And here's the thing, you're not sure who's right. Norse mythology is full of equally strange explanations for natural phenomena. The wind, that's a giant's breath. Earthquakes, Thor stumbling. The sea, that's just Jomagander, the world serpent, doing his daily stretch. Modern scholars often categorize these as poetic metaphors, ways to make sense of the unknowable. But were they really believed? Experts still debate whether these stories were taken literally, symbolically, or as entertainment. Likely a mix, kind of like this debate. Eventually the argument cools down, mostly because someone trips over the dog trying to reenact Thor's fabled toe trimming and knocks over the barrel. It was mostly full of melted snow anyway. Dinner resumes. A few people are still grumbling about the physics of frost. You accept another ladle of warm, suspiciously thick stew. This time you don't ask questions, you just eat. It's better that way. As the longhouse settles back into its usual smoky rhythm, you take a moment to look around. There's the woman mending a torn sleeve by candlelight, the man asleep with a fishbone still in his mouth, the child using a stick to draw a tiny runestone in the ash on the floor. There's Arngeir, now whispering to the fire as though it's taking his side in the great toenail debate. And there's you, smoke-streaked, soup-stuffed, sore in ways you didn't know were possible, and still kind of amused. Still here. You pull your cloak tighter and lean back, letting the warmth of the hearth crawl slowly up your limbs. The voices fade into background hum. The stories linger in the air, half-formed, half-believed. Somewhere outside, snow begins to fall again. A coincidence, or divine pedicure. Someone wakes you with a bucket of water, not thrown, though honestly that might have been kinder, but dumped. You jolt upright, soaked, gasping, and very, very cold. Your blanket's drenched, your furs are dripping, your skin is actively trying to flee your body. You open your mouth to yell, but all that comes out is an incoherent gasp. "Bath day," the woman says, far too cheerfully for a person wielding a bucket in the dead of Viking winter. Bath day. You blink at her. Surely she means foot soak, or wipe down with a mildly damp cloth. Surely she doesn't mean... But she's already walking toward the door. "River's not frozen all the way through yet," she calls back. This is a threat disguised as routine. You're ushered out of the longhouse and handed a rough towel, a wooden comb and a bar of soap made from ash, fat, and pure spite. Then you're pointed toward a narrow footpath through the trees, already trampled down by those who've gone before you. You follow, slipping slightly, arms full of things you don't want to need. The river is a narrow slash of black water snaking through a world of white. Snow overhangs the edges, ice crust the rocks, and in the middle, a wide hole, clearly chopped by hand, steam faintly rising like hope escaping. 3 people are already there. 2 are naked, teeth clenched, moving with the jerky precision of people desperately trying to convince themselves they're not dying. One is climbing out, blue-lipped and radiant, whispering, "I feel alive." You suspect they also feel frostbitten. You're next. You strip. It's terrible. Your clothes are stiff with cold and damp. Your skin prickles with icy wind. Every part of you wants to go back inside and declare yourself permanently unwashed, but you step forward, one foot, then the other, onto the slick wooden plank that juts out over the dark water. You brace, you breathe, you curse whoever invented this tradition, then you jump. The cold hits you like a betrayal. It's not water, it's memory loss. It erases thought, it scrapes your lungs, it climbs into your bones and throws a party you're not invited to. You flail, you flounder, you shriek, you surface, you do not feel alive. You feel revived in the sense that Frankenstein's monster was revived, unwillingly and with too much electricity. Hands pull you out. You stagger to the side, limbs quaking. The towel feels like a prayer. The soap, you barely use it. You just scrub fast, rinse faster and flee. Back in your furs, skin tingling, you huddle near a small fire pit someone started for exactly this purpose. Others join you, shaking, shivering, smiling through chattering teeth. There's laughter. Someone says they saw a water spirit. Another swears they reached enlightenment just before their toes went numb. Bath day, it turns out, is a community ordeal. A shared plunge into misery that leaves everyone slightly cleaner and significantly more traumatized. Historically, Viking hygiene was surprisingly robust. Weekly bathing was the norm, at least when weather allowed. The word for Saturday, lugaderga, literally means bath day. Hot springs were prized. Steam baths, or saunas, were common where possible. But in the dead of winter, a quick dip in the river was sometimes all you got. You return to the longhouse, still tingling. Your hair is damp, your fingers wrinkled, your soul bruised. But everyone who sees you nods slightly. You've done it. You're now one of the freshly half-frozen and moderately washed. Someone hands you a cup of hot broth, and you clutch it like salvation. The warmth seeps into you. You sip, you sigh, you survive. Later you catch your reflection in the side of a polished bowl. Your face is pink, your eyes wide. You look, well, cleaner, and definitely more awake than you'd like to be. The others are all doing small things, combing their hair, sewing fresh patches onto worn tunics, hanging wet towels to dry. The longhouse smells faintly better, less goat, more soap smoke. You lie down, wrap yourself in furs and shiver for a while as your body recalibrates. But there's something oddly satisfying about it all. Like you've just been spiritually reset via ice water and peer pressure. As you finally drift back into a shaky bath day nap, one last thought bubbles to the surface. Please, dear gods, don't let this be a twice-a-week tradition. You're jolted awake by something crawling in your hair. Your first thought, lice. Your second thought, definitely lice. Your third, I guess this is my life now. You sit up, scratching furiously, and glance around the longhouse. You're not alone, not even close. A small group is gathered in a circle near the fire, casually picking through each other's scalps like a group of medieval baboons on spa day. There's a rhythm to it. Part grooming, part gossip, all deeply uncomfortable to watch if you weren't already itchy. "Come," says an older woman, beckoning to you with a bony finger and the no-nonsense tone of someone who's dealt with centuries of hair-related drama. Everyone gets checked. You're new. You probably brought them. You don't argue. You just shuffle over, sit on the fur mat and brace yourself. She begins with a comb, bone, of course, pulling it slowly through your hair while muttering things like, "too much soot," and "your scalp's dry." It's oddly maternal, terrifyingly intimate, and somehow soothing once the initial panic wears off. Around you, the rest of the group chats idly. So then I said, "If that goat's the healer, why does it limp?" Laughter. Another voice. "Did you hear Astrid swore her bread rose on its own?" "No yeast." "Said it was a gift from the gods." A round of sceptical grunts. Then someone lowers their voice and leans in conspiratorially. "I saw Bjorn bury a doll in the snowbank. Little face carved into it. Looked like his brother." This stops the grooming circle for half a beat. "Is he hexing him or protecting him?" someone asks. "Could be both," another shrugs. "It is Tuesday." And that apparently ends the conversation. You're told your lice situation is acceptable. You're not sure what that means on the Viking hygiene scale, but the woman pats your head and moves on. You're handed a small cloth sachet of something pungent, dried herbs and pine sap to tie into your hair. You do it without asking. You're learning. Historically, lice were a constant nuisance in Viking life. Despite regular bathing and grooming, the communal living, fur layers, and lack of modern pest control made it nearly impossible to avoid. Combs and delousing sessions like this one were part of daily life, often paired with socialising, matchmaking, and the occasional bout of good-natured slander. Later in the day, as you help tidy up the longhouse, you notice a series of small charms hanging over the doorway. Little bundles of hair, bone fragments, feathers. You ask someone what they're for. "Warding off spirits," they reply simply. "What kind of spirits?" you ask. They shrug. "Any that like warm places." You don't love that answer. It gets better. Someone shows you a carved runestone tucked under a bed mat. It's meant to protect the sleeper from dreams that walk. Not bad dreams, walking dreams. You decide not to ask for clarification. Fringe detail. Norse folklore is filled with protective charms and rituals, often mixing pagan traditions with personal superstition. Hair, bones, herbs, and even fingernail clippings could be used as wards against illness, jealousy, or supernatural intrusion. The line between medicine and magic was as blurry as the longhouse windows after a week of stew steam. As the sun fades again, if it ever rose, you're invited to join the evening grooming circle. This time, you're not the victim. You're handed a comb and told to help. You approach your neighbour, a man with wild eyebrows and a suspicious mole, and begin. It's awkward. Personal, kind of weird, and yet strangely calming. He sighs contentedly. You work through a tangle the size of a small bird. He doesn't even flinch. You're learning things that no history book could have warned you about. Afterward, someone passes around a sweetish liquor made from fermented berries and something else that no one will name. It burns your throat and warms your toes. You drink it anyway. The longhouse smells of pine, hair oil, and ancient gossip. You lie back, hair freshly deloused, stomach full of root vegetable slop, hands still smelling faintly of mystery herbs. And in this moment, surrounded by chewing goats and half-singing neighbours, you realise something profound. You may never be truly clean again, but you might be considered socially acceptable. And in this world, that's basically royalty. There's shouting outside. Not panicked shouting. More the kind that suggests someone's haggling very aggressively over something ridiculous. You shuffle to the doorway, rubbing sleep from your eyes with a fur sleeve, and peek out into the snow-blasted courtyard. A trader has arrived. He's wrapped in so many layers he resembles a walking bundle of laundry, with a long beard sticking out like a broom. Behind him, a sled creaks under the weight of mysterious bundles, wooden crates, netted sacks, and a large barrel that sloshes ominously. Half the village has gathered around him already. There's energy in the air, actual excitement. You've grown so accustomed to the slow, smoky rhythm of winter that this sudden burst of capitalism feels thrilling. You step outside, boots crunching over packed snow, and edge your way into the crowd. The sled contains treasures. Well, Viking treasures. Which is to say, dried cod, smoked herring, questionable cheese, iron nails, a spool of wool thread, 2 sacks of dried lingonberries, and what looks like half a fermented shark wrapped in birch bark. Someone gasps reverently. The haggling begins. 4 herring for the berries. 3 herring and 1 shoe. That shoe's got a hole. Then plug it with fish. You watch in awe as negotiations reach fever pitch. Hands wave, snow gets stomped, and at one point someone offers their mother-in-law as part of the deal. She does not look amused. You spot something near the back of the sled, a carved figurine. Small, detailed, made of soapstone, a Valkyrie maybe, or a goddess. It catches your eye. You ask the trader about it. 10 dried cod, he says. You check your pockets. 2 pieces of dried apple and a bit of old cheese. You try to haggle. 5 cod, you say. He laughs. For 5, I'll let you touch it. You walk away with dignity, or at least the appearance of it, and console yourself by trading one of your apple slices for a bit of dried meat. It's cold, salty, and very chewy, basically jerky from the dawn of time. Still, it feels like a victory. Trade was central to Viking life. Despite their fearsome reputation as raiders, the Norse were also expert merchants, with routes stretching from North America to the Middle East. Fish, furs, amber, and iron were common exports. In return, they brought in spices, silks, glass beads, and yes, fermented shark. Because sometimes, all you really want is the taste of disappointment sealed in a fish. By midday, the courtyard is a chaos of exchange. Someone has acquired a new hat and is parading it proudly. A child is now in possession of a single iron nail and considers himself very rich. A man is licking the inside of a honey jar he just bartered for. You try not to judge. The trader, meanwhile, sets up a makeshift fire and begins warming a pot of something sharp and pungent. Mead, soup, industrial sealant. It's unclear. You're offered a sip. You accept. It burns, but in a festive way. Back inside the longhouse, the new supplies are shared and stored. The smoked fish is hung from beams, the cheese sealed in wax cloth, the wool stashed near the looms. There's a palpable sense of improvement. Minor, but morale-boosting. You're handed a piece of frozen cod. It's hard as stone, smells like brine and ghost regrets, and apparently counts as your evening protein. You nod solemnly. You chew with effort. You try to look grateful. Later, you're invited to sit near the hearth with the older women, who are weaving new patches into worn tunics. One of them is humming the same tune you've heard several times now. Soft, repetitive, oddly hypnotic. You join in on the beat, tapping your fingers against your knee, and the rhythm clicks into place. For a brief moment, with a sliver of dried meat between your teeth and wool scraps in your lap, you almost forget how cold it is. The door creaks open, and snow blows in again. The trader's leaving, sled now lighter, beard even frostier. He waves once, disappears into the grey. Another mystery bundle rolling toward the next village. Someone nudges you. You learn to love trader days, they say, not because of the fish, but because they remind you the world's still out there. You nod. You believe them. And then, as you return to your fire-warmed spot on the floor, someone hands you a surprise. A single, perfectly round lingonberry. You eat it. It's tart, bright, alive, a red dot of summer in the middle of a very long winter. You've just about dozed off when something shrieks. It's high-pitched, sustained, and filled with the righteous fury of a tiny creature with few teeth but many opinions. A baby. You crack one eye open. Across the longhouse, a swaddled toddler is flailing on a pile of furs, red-faced and very much not in favour of existence right now. Next to the baby, a young woman, his mother presumably, is bouncing him with one hand while rubbing her temple with the other. And behind her, an older man shaking a bundle of bones tied to a stick. It rattles with wild intensity like a wind chime possessed by an over-enthusiastic ghost. The baby, bafflingly, screams louder. You sit up. The baby wails. The rattle rattles. Someone drops a wooden cup. The dog barks. You sigh. Welcome to Viking childcare. You offer a sympathetic glance toward the mother, who looks back at you with the blank, soul-tired stare of someone who has not slept since the solstice. You shuffle closer, hands raised in peace. Need help? You whisper. She gestures helplessly toward the rattleman. He says it's colic, or a curse, or he's teething, or all three. You take the baby. He's warm and loud, very loud. You bounce him. He kicks you. You hum something that might be calming. He pulls your hair. Eventually the old man hands you the bone rattle. Shake it, he says. You do. It clacks like two skeletons arguing in a broom closet. The baby stares at it, goes silent. You pause, shake it again, gently this time. The baby giggles. You've never felt more powerful. Child rearing in Viking culture was communal. Mothers were central figures, but siblings, grandparents, and even neighbours took turns soothing, feeding, or entertaining the little ones. Infants were swaddled tightly, carried in slings or fur bundles, and often rocked or sung to with lullabies that bordered on threats. You once heard one earlier that ended with, "And if you cry again, the Draugr will know." Comforting. Bone rattles like this were common, crafted from sheep or goat bones, strung with shells, beads, or bits of metal. Part toy, part distraction, part early introduction to the realities of noisy living. You carry the baby back to his mother, who slumps with relief. He likes you, she says. You're not sure if you should be honoured or worried. Later, the rattle gets passed around. A group of children starts using it as a prop in an impromptu story, a very dramatic retelling of The Cow That Became a King. You're not clear on the plot, but the sound effects are excellent. As night falls, the longhouse quiets. Kind of. The baby finally sleeps, head nestled against his mother's shoulder, his breath shallow and steady. The rattle is placed beside him like a ward against further tantrums. The fire glows low. The air hums with the soft rustle of fur, the occasional crack of wood. You lie back and stare at the ceiling, where the smoke has formed strange, ghostly spirals. You think about your own childhood. Softer beds, maybe, but less goats. A scholar might tell you that Viking children had hard lives. High infant mortality, early chores, few luxuries, and they'd be right. But there's tenderness here too. The gentle way the mother adjusts her son's blanket. The way the old man watches them both from across the room, rattle still in hand. The stories. The songs. In this long, brutal winter, every laugh is sacred. Every nap a treasure. You close your eyes. The baby sighs in his sleep, and for the first time all day, the longhouse is silent. You're outside again. Not because you want to be, no one wants to be, but because your name came up for night watch. You don't remember volunteering. In fact, you're almost positive this was decided while you were asleep, mouth open, dreaming of a life with central heating. But here you are, bundled in every layer of fur and wool available, standing in the snow while the rest of the village sleeps like warm burritos under a thatch roof. You clutch a spear. Not a glamorous one, just a long stick with a metal tip that's seen better centuries. It's mostly symbolic. If something comes out of the forest, you're probably going to scream first and poke second. The village is eerily quiet. Even the animals are silent, No snoring goats, no grumbling chickens, no fish-related drama. Just snow. Soft, relentless, falling like it's being poured from an endless sky bucket. You stamp your feet, try to keep blood in your toes. Your breath steams in the air like you're a tired dragon guarding absolutely nothing. Somewhere, an owl hoots. Somewhere else, ice cracks like a warning shot. You squint into the dark and begin to wonder if Night Watch isn't about security at all. Maybe it's a test, a kind of rite of passage. Can you stand alone, with nothing but the cold and your thoughts, and not lose your mind? Because your thoughts are definitely turning on you. You imagine a bear stepping out of the forest, or a wolf, or a really angry snowman with vengeance in his heart. You grip your spear a little tighter. To distract yourself, you replay the training you were given for this job. Stand still, watch the perimeter, don't fall asleep. If anything does attack, yell, loudly, preferably words. It's not much. Historically, guarding the village perimeter was vital in winter, not just from wild animals, but rival settlements. While raids slowed in the colder months, they didn't stop entirely. A desperate village might risk a stealth attack for food or supplies, and even if humans stayed away, nature had its own surprises: wolves, frostbite, or the occasional cracked beam collapsing under snow. You do a little pacing, walk the edge of the fence. It's more drift than fence now, half buried under weeks of snowfall patched with twine, hope, and what looks like an old sled part. You find a decent vantage point near the storage hut, climb atop a barrel, peer out at the dark woods beyond. Snow, trees, silence. Then, movement. Your heart skips. There, just past the edge of the tree line, something shifts. You freeze, every muscle tense, eyes wide, breath held. It's a deer, just a deer. It blinks at you, unimpressed, then continues rooting around in the snow for something edible. You exhale so hard it fogs your entire face. The deer pauses, stares at you again. You nod respectfully, it nods back. Probably coincidence. Eventually your shift ends. You trudge back toward the longhouse, limbs stiff, nose numb, and pride wounded. Someone else takes your place, a burly woman with an axe and no fear in her eyes. You hand off the spear and receive a nod, that's all. No ceremony, just mutual understanding. You froze your face off for the good of the group. Well done. Inside, the longhouse glows like a dream. You peel off your outer layer and collapse onto your pile of furs. The fire is low. Most people are asleep. One man is snoring like a boat in distress. The baby sighs in his dreams. You lie there, heart still ticking from the imagined snow beast attack, and listen to the wind push against the beams. You made it through the night. And though no hero's ballad will be sung in your name somewhere deep inside, you feel like you earned something. A little grit, a little glory, and possibly frostbite on your left earlobe. You're not sure what wakes you this time. Maybe it's the cold. Maybe it's the whispering. Maybe it's the sound of ancient timber creaking in a way that suggests it knows things and has regrets. You sit up slowly, rubbing your eyes, and glance around the longhouse. It's quiet, but not peacefully so. More watchfully quiet. The kind of hush that hangs in the air when everyone's pretending not to hear the same thing. A soft draft tickles the back of your neck. A breeze, but from inside. You glance toward the door, shut tight. No holes, no open windows, but the air feels different. You pull your furs tighter, then the whispering starts again. Not voices, not exactly, just sound, like breath through pine needles, like a lullaby hummed from the rafters. You're not alone in noticing. Others stir, shifting in their sleep. One woman opens her eyes and stares upward. A man murmurs something in his sleep and rolls away from the hearth. The dog lifts its head, growls faintly, then tucks its nose under its tail. Someone across the room mutters, "Odin walks tonight." You laugh, nervously, but no one else laughs with you. The old woman, yes, the one who picked lice off your scalp like it was a competitive sport, sits up and begins throwing herbs into the hearth. The flames hiss. The room smells of sage and smoke and anxiety. She doesn't speak. She just nods toward the rafters. You look up. There's nothing there, just shadows, wood beams, a single strand of cobweb fluttering like it's breathing. Then another draft sweeps through. A support beam creaks. The flames flicker sideways. The baby begins to whimper. Someone whispers a prayer. It's not to Jesus. It's not even to Thor. It's older. You don't recognise the name. You hope it's a friendly one. You lie back down, eyes wide open. The Norse believed their world was layered, realms stacked like furs in a chest. Midgard, where humans live. Asgard, where gods plot. Helheim, where the dead wander. But there were others too, less defined, less welcome. Spirits of the cold, Draugr, the Huldra. Beings that didn't knock, didn't announce themselves, didn't need an invitation. And in winter, when night stretched longer than memory and the fire was the only thing between you and the dark, those beliefs came alive. You've heard the stories, the house spirits who braid your hair while you sleep, the ghost of the forest bride who calls to travellers in snow, the old man who walks the rooftops at night dragging chains made of old oaths. You press yourself deeper into the furs, the air stills. For a long, long time, no one moves. Then, as if on cue, the wind outside begins again, louder this time, more assertive. A shutter bangs against the wall. The dog growls low in its throat. The woman at the fire throws more herbs. Someone hums. The longhouse smells of fear and pine. And then, as suddenly as it came, the draught vanishes. The flames settle. The air warms. The silence relaxes. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. Someone chuckles softly from the corner. He passed by, they say, just checking on us. You look at them. They're smiling, but not joking. Outside, the snow continues to fall. Soft, slow, steady, as if nothing happened at all. Inside, everyone gradually settles, back into their beds, back into their furs. No one mentions it again, but no one sleeps easily either. Not tonight. You curl into yourself, eyes fixed on the rafters, and whisper a quiet, uncertain goodnight to whoever might be listening. You've barely slept, and when you do finally drift off, your dreams are full of snow. Not soft, cinematic snow, Viking snow. Snow that bites your face. Snow that knocks on the door, comes in uninvited, eats your stew and criticises your firewood stacking. So when someone nudges you awake and says, "Raiding parties forming, want to join?" your response is somewhere between a groan and an audible existential crisis. Raiding. Of course. Because nothing says midwinter wellness like jogging into the snow with a weapon and no clear meal plan. You're not given much time to think about it. A bundle of gear is shoved into your arms, an axe, a small round shield with a chunk missing, and a helmet that smells like disappointment and old sweat. There's no warm-up, no motivational speech, just the same logic that seems to fuel all Viking activity. Well, someone has to. You follow the others outside, feet crunching through the crusted snow, breath clouding the air like a nervous fog. The raiding party is small, 7, maybe 8 people, a mix of seasoned fighters and a few like you, heavily bundled, clearly regretting life. You fall into formation such as it is, and start marching across the frozen field. At first, the cold slaps you awake, then it seeps in, then it settles. You reach the point where your legs are moving, but you've lost all connection to your extremities. Your fingers are stiff around your axe. Your lips stick together when you try to talk. The leader of the group, Rooney, a wiry man with ice on his eyelashes and zero indoor voice, shouts encouragements over his shoulder. "Feel the cold in your bones. This is how you earn your place in the sagas. Anyone who passes out gets carried back by goats." Eventually you stop and take cover near a snow-drifted outcropping. The raid, it turns out, is a training exercise, a test run. The real thing comes in spring, maybe. Today they're just seeing who's tough enough to trudge for miles and still swing an axe. You are not. They set up a mock sparring ring. It's a circle stamped into the snow. Someone tosses a leather-wrapped bundle in the centre. "This is the sheep," they explain. "Your job is to protect it. Everyone else's job is to steal it. You're given first guard duty. You place your foot on the bundle, raise your shield, grip your axe. The first challenger charges, and you instantly fall on your rear. They don't even take the sheep. They just help you up, pat you on the back and say, 'Good instinct, terrible footing.' The next few rounds go only marginally better. You manage to swing the axe once without letting go. You keep the sheep for a full 10 seconds, and you only end up with snow in your boots twice. Historically, Viking raids were seasonal, often launched in the warmer months when travel was easier and loot more plentiful. But the training, the preparation, the sheer mental toughness required to endure winter in gear, that was year-round. Young warriors were tested in harsh conditions and mock drills weren't uncommon. Eventually the group breaks for a cold lunch. slabs of dried meat and chunks of flatbread that taste mostly like their storage sack. You chew in silence, staring out at the frozen expanse, wondering how far the sea is from here, wondering what it would feel like to actually raid a coastal monastery. You imagine tripping on the shore, dropping your axe and getting scolded by a monk. Back in the village by dusk, the mood is light. Everyone's laughing, shaking snow from their cloaks, arguing good-naturedly over who fell hardest. You're nursing a bruised hip and a frozen pinky toe, but no one seems to notice. You enter the longhouse to the smell of stew, new stew, thick with barley and something that might have once been meat. You're too tired to care. You just eat. Across the fire, someone asks how the training went. You reply with the utmost Viking honesty, "I lived." They grin. Then you're ahead of most sheep. You wrap yourself in furs and lie down, soar in all the places you didn't know existed. Outside, the wind picks up again. Inside, the fire flickers. Someone's snoring already. The dog is chewing a boot. The baby murmurs in his sleep. And you're still here. Still breathing. Still not dead from axe practice. That counts. The mead hall is not what you expected. You'd pictured grand feasting, roaring laughter, golden goblets sloshing with honey wine, and long toasts to gods and glory. Instead, you step into a smoky, mud-floored chamber with warped benches, a ceiling so low even the chickens have to duck, and a pervasive smell that can only be described as fermented goat ambition. And yet, it's oddly festive. The hall is dimly lit by flickering tallow lamps, casting soft yellow puddles of light over clay cups and hand-hewn tables. A few villagers are gathered around a central fire pit, sharing a jug of something steaming and suspicious. Someone is playing a lyre that's missing at least 2 strings but still managing to produce vaguely musical sounds. You're invited in with a grunt and a gesture toward a bench. You sit. The bench immediately tilts sideways. You recover with surprising grace. Only your dignity hits the floor. A woman nearby passes you a wooden cup. It's warm, sweet, sharp. Mead, they tell you. But stronger than you expected. You take a sip, then a second, then regret both. The conversation swells around you. A man tells a story about a fox that outwitted a hunter by impersonating a bishop. It makes absolutely no sense, but no one questions it. Another villager loudly insists they once saw a raven deliver a love letter. Someone starts laughing, loud, wheezy, full-body laughter that tips him off the bench entirely. No one helps him up. He lies there, giggling into the straw. And there you are, holding a cup of honey wine, with knees still bruised from your failed warrior audition, sitting in a room that smells like history's armpit, and smiling. The mead hall, it turns out, is less about grandeur and more about survival. A place to blow off steam, share half-true tales, and remember that laughter exists, even in the deepest snow. It's rowdy therapy, it's smoky group bonding, it's chaos, but it's warm chaos. Historically, mead halls varied in size and formality. For nobles, they were seats of power and status. But in villages like this, the mead hall was communal, a place to gather, eat, trade gossip, and weather the cold together. The drink, mead, made from fermented honey, water, and sometimes fruit or herbs. Not always delicious, often potent. Someone bumps your elbow and challenges you to a drinking game. You accept before realizing the rules are incomprehensible. Dice are involved. Possibly bones. Someone yells owl at random intervals. You lose. Spectacularly. Your punishment? You must stand on the unstable bench and sing a song from your homeland. You clear your throat, panic, and croak out a vaguely tuneful rendition of Row, row, row your boat, which they find utterly hilarious. One man repeats the lyrics back with great solemnity, as if deciphering a sacred riddle. Merrily, merrily, but what is life but a dream, he whispers, awestruck. You sit back down, face flushed, not from the mead, but from the absurdity of it all. Then the floor betrays you. It was bound to happen. The combination of weak wood, spilled drink, and your unfortunate seating angle causes the bench to tip once more. You fall straight into a puddle of melted snow and something less identifiable. Your backside is now a sponge of ancient Viking floor sauce. The room erupts in laughter. You're pulled up by 2 large hands and handed another cup. Now you're officially one of us, someone says. You think that's a compliment. The fire crackles. The lyre twangs out a crooked melody. A woman starts clapping in time. The rest follow. Soon the mead hall is pulsing with uneven rhythm, half-mumbled songs and the scent of spilled honey and smoke. You lean back against the wall, drenched, half-drunk and entirely bewildered, and you realise this is joy. Cracked, smoky, goat-flavoured joy. You raise your cup to not freezing, to falling off benches, to sacred owls and dreamlike lives. You drink. You wake up with a goat licking your ear and a child drawing on your forehead with charcoal. You blink slowly. The fire is down to embers. The room is lit in that dreamy pre-dawn gloom, and there's a faint draught coming from somewhere it absolutely shouldn't. You sit up. The goat bleats. The child shrieks with laughter and sprints away, charcoal stick held high like a torch of mischief. You wipe your forehead. You now have what appears to be a lopsided rune and an exaggerated moustache. You leave it. Why fight fate? You shuffle toward the fire where a few early risers are already crouched with mugs of morning broth. You're handed one. It smells stable. You sip. It's hot, vaguely salty, and full of mystery protein. You don't ask. Today, you're told, is recreation day. You narrow your eyes. Is that code for dig a new latrine pit? The man grins. Nope, it's games. Games. You don't know whether to be thrilled or alarmed. Turns out this particular village enjoys an age-old pastime, Nefertafel. A board game involving strategy, betrayal, and more arguing than actual moves. But before you're roped into that, the kids have other plans. They want you for the Knucklebone Championship. You're led outside into the snow-covered courtyard. A ring is cleared with boots. Flat stones are placed for seating. A dozen kids and a few adults gather around a shallow bowl filled with polished, clacking sheep ankle bones. The rules are explained quickly and with much shouting. You toss the bones into the air and catch them on the back of your hand. Simple, right? Your first attempt results in 2 bones caught, 3 to the face, and 1 swallowed by a goat. Laughter erupts. You're not deterred. Round 2, better. You catch 4. The kids nod, impressed. The crowd begins to whisper your name in mock reverence. The outsider, Bone Master, the Snowfinger. You're blushing from cold and pride. Round 3, 1 kid catches all 5, balancing them perfectly. The crowd goes wild. You applaud sincerely. The kid bows, stumbles, and falls face first into a snowbank. Someone yells, "Penalty round!" and the rules change entirely. Now, you must throw the bones behind your back, do a spin, clap, and then catch them. You do your best. You catch nothing. But you spin, you clap, and your performance is declared spiritually victorious. Fringe historical tidbit. Games like Knucklebones were common in Viking Age societies. Not just for children. Adults played too, often betting food, furs, or minor favours. They weren't just games, they were social glue. In a world without scheduled fun, every laugh counted. Every little game was rebellion against the dark. After the bones, someone challenges you to a wrestling match. You decline. You've seen what these people do to firewood. They'd fold you like a linen napkin and still ask if you were trying. Instead, you join a simpler game, stick throwing. Targets are drawn in the snow. Distance, angle, arc, all debated fiercely. Someone keeps score using runes scratched into ice. You do shockingly well, until one of your throws hits the chicken coop and ignites a series of furious clucks and one very offended rooster. You apologise. The rooster stares into your soul. By midday, your hands are red from cold, your knees soaked through, and your face hurts from smiling. A small feast is laid out. Simple fare. Flatbread, cold smoked fish, a dab of preserved berries. But today, even that feels celebratory. You sit with the children. One is now carving your likeness, badly, into a bit of bone. You have 3 eyes and enormous teeth. You cherish it. After eating, someone suggests music. A man brings out a drum made from stretched hide and a carved bone flute. The beat is uneven, the tune is haunting, but the effect, magical. Snow falls in slow spirals as the village claps in rhythm. Children stomp their feet. The dog howls. Even the goat, now wearing a small scarf, you don't ask, joins the circle. You're pulled into a ring of dancers. It's more shuffling than choreography, more laughter than grace. You lose a boot. You almost fall. Someone catches you. You stay out there longer than expected, long enough to feel like you belong, long enough to forget that your pants are frozen at the hem. As the sun slips low, what little of it appears, You return to the longhouse with the others. Inside, the fire has been rebuilt. The smell of something sweet lingers. Honey and grain, maybe? Someone hands you a treat. A small cake, more chew than crumble, but warm. You take a bite. It's glorious. And as you settle back into your fur pile, bruised from play, bone carving tucked into your pocket, still wearing that charcoal moustache you can't help but feel. This was your best day yet. You're not quite sure how it happened. One moment, you're savouring the last crumbs of your crumbliest hard bread cake. The next, someone announces with great enthusiasm and zero explanation, "We've voted! You're the goat!" Everyone cheers. You blink. The goat? A fur is thrown over your shoulders, shaggy, scratchy, vaguely goat-scented. A horned cap is placed on your head. You try to ask a question, but a child is already smearing soot across your cheeks and chanting, "Goat, goat, goat." You're guided, no, paraded, into the centre of the longhouse, which has been rearranged into a ceremonial circle. Villagers have gathered with instruments, rattles, bowls of questionable liquids, and the kind of gleam in their eyes that only appears when a community's gone too long without proper sunlight. This, it seems, is the winter solstice ritual, and you are the honorary ritual goat. Congratulations. You glance around for help. No one offers any. Someone hands you a staff made of bone and pine, with feathers tied to the top and runes carved along its length. Another places a crown of dried herbs on your shoulders. It smells like soup, but ancient. You're pushed toward the fire pit. A hush falls. Then the music begins, drumming, clapping, stomping. A woman begins singing in Old Norse, her voice low and rhythmic like it's echoing from a cave. Others join in. The room pulses with the sound of breath and bone, hand and hide. You're urged to dance, so you do, badly, but with heart. You stomp, you twirl, you make goat sounds. Why not? You're already committed. The children howl with laughter. Someone tosses dried berries in the air like confetti. You trip over a dog. The dog forgives you. And here's the strangest part. You're not embarrassed. You feel powerful, sacred even. You, the outsider, the one who couldn't catch a knucklebone or stand upright on a log, are now the centerpiece of a ritual older than memory. And the villagers are loving it. Viking winter solstice festivals were more than feasts. They were survival celebrations. Called Jol, which eventually evolved into Yule, these festivals honoured the longest night, the turning of the sun, the thinning of the veil between worlds. Offerings were made, songs were sung, and roles were reversed. Goats, symbolic of fertility and renewal, played central roles. Sometimes actual goats, sometimes brave volunteers. That's you, the brave volunteer. Halfway through the ceremony, you're handed a carved horn of mead. It's warm and spiced and hits you like an encouraging bear hug. You drink it, possibly too fast. The dancing intensifies. Now people are circling you, throwing herbs into the fire, chanting old blessings in voices that vibrate deep in your chest. Someone says, "You must chase away the cold spirits." You're given a broom. You don't ask questions. You charge dramatically around the longhouse, waving your broom, shouting nonsense. The crowd erupts in cheer. A small child runs screaming from you, on purpose. A man pretends to faint when you tap him with the broom. You are, for this one night, the most important person in the room. Eventually the music slows, the singing softens. You're led to the hearth and told to sit. You do. The elder woman who once checked your scalp places a warm stone in your lap and mutters a blessing under her breath. You catch the words for fire, new sun, and no more goat lice. You feel honoured. The ritual ends with the passing of a small flame around the room, each person lighting their candle from the central fire. It's symbolic, you're told. Each flame carries the warmth forward into the new season. You light yours with shaking hands, suddenly aware of how still and reverent everything has become. The goat costume stays on. You're not allowed to remove it until morning. As people drift off to sleep, some curled near the fire, others wrapped in furs by the walls, you remain seated watching your little candle flicker beside you. The smoke curls upward, blending with the faint breath of dozens of sleepers. You are the goat, the sacred fool, the chosen guardian of the longest night. You curl into your scratchy fur, head full of rhythm and honeyed mead, and smile. Tonight you were ridiculous, and you were revered. Not a bad trade. Dawn arrives slowly, reluctantly, like even the sun isn't entirely convinced it should be awake. You stir under your pile of furs, still wearing the goat costume, which now smells faintly of smoke, spilled mead, and your own slowly fermented dignity. Someone's draped an extra blanket over your legs, a quiet kindness. The longhouse is a soft, drowsy mess. Villagers are beginning to rouse, blinking in the dim light, stretching like cats, groaning like very old ships. The fire still crackles low in the hearth. Your candle, burned down to a stub, is perched on a beam beside you, a tiny survivor of last night's strange reverence. You sit up slowly. Everything aches. Your head, your legs, your soul. But there's something else too. A quiet contentment, like a heavy coat of peace wrapped around your bones. People begin to gather near the central fire for the final meal before the morning chores resume. You're handed a bowl, porridge, sweetened faintly with the last of the dried berries. There's even a smear of something buttery on top. It's delicious by Viking standards. Frankly, it might be the best thing you've tasted all week. You eat slowly, savouring every bite, the way one might savour a letter from home. Around you, conversations hum gently to life. "I think the goat danced better this year," someone says. "Definitely," another agrees. "More feeling." You smile into your bowl. After breakfast, the room begins its return to normalcy. Blankets are folded, crumbs are swept, children are herded toward tasks. The music of the previous night fades into memory, but the warmth lingers. You step outside, the snow has stopped. The village is hushed in fresh white. Clean, gentle. Even the air feels different. Less like a threat, more like a promise. Your breath puffs before you in soft clouds. The sky, for the first time in what feels like weeks, shows the faintest hint of blue. You walk past the pens, the animals are calm. The goat, that goat, makes eye contact with you. Neither of you speaks. You've shared something now, a mutual absurdity. You continue past the well, the forge, the snow-stained logs where you once fumbled an axe and nearly invented early orthopedic surgery. All around, the village creaks back to life, slowly but surely. You return to the longhouse, begin gathering your things, what little you've collected. A carved comb, a bone spoon, a wool scrap with your name, or something approximating your name, stitched into it with uneven thread. You tuck the goat costume away, fold it neatly, place it beside the hearth. Someone will need it next year. A few people come to say goodbye, each in their own understated way. The old woman nods once, hands you a linen pouch filled with dried herbs. "For the lice," she says. You nod back, sincerely grateful. The child who drew on your face hands you a new piece of charcoal, in case you want to improve it next time. Someone slips a strip of dried fish into your pocket. You pretend not to notice. Then Rooney appears, the loud, frost-covered man who led you into the snow with a blunt axe and louder advice. He says nothing, just claps you once firmly on the shoulder. You feel it in your spine. No fanfare, no farewell feast, just warmth, connection, shared hardship and shared laughter. You step outside one last time, the snow crunching beneath your boots, and turn to look back at the longhouse. The leaning beams, the thatched roof, the smoke curling from the centre. You survived. Not just a Viking winter, but the noise, the quiet, the goats, the hunger, the bone tools, the ghost drafts, the long, strange nights. You survived the cold and the closeness, the soup and the soot, the myths and the realities. And as you take your first steps away, the wind catches you, gently this time. No slap, just a nudge, like the village itself saying, "Go on, you've earned it." The road ahead is still blanketed in snow, but you walk it lighter than when you arrived. Behind you, the longhouse hums with life, voices rising, fires crackling, laughter beginning again, even if softly. Your footprints trail behind in the fresh powder, soon to fade, soon to be covered, but they were there. You were there. Let the cold recede now. Let the smoke become memory. Let your fingers thaw in the gentle hush of morning. Tonight, in the warmth of your own bed, perhaps you'll remember the rough wool on your skin, the bone comb in your pocket, the goat's breath against your cheek. You'll remember the songs, the snow, the stories whispered to the rafters, the child's drawing, the lice patrol, the sacred rattle of ankle bones on frozen earth. You were part of it. Just for a while. You were a thread in their winter, and now, with your breath slow and deep, eyes heavy, you can let it go. Let your muscles soften. Let your thoughts quiet. Let the mead-fueled drumbeat fade, because the snow has stopped, and the village sleeps, and the goat is someone else's problem now. End of script. Sweet dreams.